Eve Story by Chan Thomas, Chapter 3, The Story. Enigma, Pursuit, Unraveling. It's funny how some things can plague you from your childhood years through your adult years. Not big things necessarily, but little things, which don't exactly persist, but annoyingly stick their heads through your life's door and say, boo. Just to let you know, they're still there. If I made a list of all these things in my life, it might take up a whole book. I'd like to talk about just one of these bugaboos. From the first time I heard the story of the creation and Adam and Eve, even as a child, it bothered me. To me, the answer wasn't simply one of two usual alternatives, either unquestioning faith in the story as it sounds, or complete repudiation as utter nonsense. No, the answer seemed to lie elsewhere. If the story were taught as the truth so uniformly, in spite of its apparent divergence from scientific truths, then to me the true course would seem to be to search for the foundation of the story, which would then lead to a true reading of it. The pursuit happened almost by accident. Years of data correlation and studying cataclysmology has shown the last cataclysm to have occurred about 7,000 years ago. That Noah, or Utamashittim, or whatever his name was, did exist and did survive that cataclysm. A friend of mine suggested that Genesis 1 is almost a perfect description of conditions on our planet right after a cataclysm, including about a week following. On rereading it, I had to agree. Genesis 2 even mentions that a mist, proper translation inundation, arose from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Well now, this was worth thinking about. If it were so, then it would be the cataclysm preceding Noah, another fascinating story, about 11,500 years ago. This then could be approximately the time of the Adam and Eve story. The pursuit started, if the story did originate with that cataclysm, in what language was it first written? Certainly not Hebrew or Greek, for as far as we know, they didn't even exist at the time. Was it possible to delve into the vanished pages of prehistory and find both the language and the story as originally written? If we look to men such as Don Antonio Batres, Jurakai, and James Churchward, we may have our answer. Certainly their knowledge of prehistoric languages could be a key, and later we'll discuss the role of Naga and ancient Mayan in the story of Adam and Eve. First, however, let's examine the history of Genesis 1, 2, and 3. There are many schools of thought on this subject. The predominant one is that Moses was the originator. This seems not obtuse, since Moses was reared in the Egyptian tradition. In a royal household, he probably had access to many religious writings and teachings, now lost with the passing of the archives in Egypt, in Alexandria, Heliopolis, and Sais. Certainly the Ten Commandments were a condensation of the 42 questions of Osiris for entering heaven. If Moses did write part of the Old Testament, he then must have had Naga tablet writings, or Egyptian interpretations of them, handed down to the Egyptians for thousands of years to the royal households, and the Egyptian priesthood had knowledge of a cataclysm 11,500 years ago from our time. The priests of Egypt were supposed to have told Solon during his 10 years in Egypt, about 600 BC, that 9,000 years before that time there was a cataclysm which buried Atlantis beneath the ocean. Note that 9,000 plus 600 BC plus 1,950 AD equals 11,550 years ago. Moses' brother Aaron became the first chief priest of the Hebrews about 1,300 BC, somewhere between 15 and 18 generations later. The chief priesthood having been handed down from father to son through the generations, Siriah or Sirius was the chief priest. See Ezra and 1 and 2 Esdras. Later, in 586 BC, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Sirah was executed, and his son Ezra made a captive in Persia. See 2 Kings. Jerusalem was attacked, and all Hebrew laws and records of the Old Testament were burned with the Temple of Jerusalem by Nebuzaradan, Nebuchadnezzar's captain of the guard. In 458 BC, the 7th year of Artaxerxes' reign in Persia, Ezra was commissioned to reestablish the Hebrew religion and law, according to 2 Esdras. Ezra rewrote the history of the Hebrews from the beginning and reestablished their laws. Now, from 586 to 458 BC is 128 years. The latest that Ezra could have been born was after his father Syria's execution. As well could be, see Onan's story, Genesis 38, 8 through 10. Therefore, the youngest he could have been in 458 was 127. He was working on a long memory. Let's examine this anomaly. As mentioned before, the lineage from Aaron to Ezra contains from 17 to 20 generations, including Aaron and Ezra, assuming 1300 BC to be the start of Aaron's priesthood. 1290 BC is adjacent to the time of Exodus 2. 458 BC to be near the end of Ezra's priesthood. Then we find the average priesthood term per generation to be between 42.1 and 49.5 years. In view of this, we can believe that Ezra served his priesthood for approximately 130 years, which includes his entire lifespan. It would appear much more plausible to assume that it was Ezra's grandfather Azariah rather than his father Sariah, who was the one taken and executed by Nebuchadnezzar's men in 586 BC. Then Sirah and Ezra would have served as chief priests from 586 to 458 BC for an average of 64 years apiece. It is even plausible that Ezra's great-grandfather Hilkiah could have been the victim in 586 BC, leaving Sirah, and Ezra to serve the 128 years for an average of 42 years each, which is even closer to the overall average of 42.1 to 49.5 years from Aaron to Ezra over a period of about 845 years. This means that the Adam and Eve story was last seen in writing by Hilkiah or Azariah, therefore handed down verbally, possibly by Ezra, and certainly by Sirah and Ezra, and finally dictated by Ezra to 5 scribes. It is the 5 scribes' writings that we have today as Ezra's work, and the English is not even a literal translation. For instance, without form and void, more literally would read raging inundations and horrendous winds. Now, through Ezra's reconstruction of Genesis, we are told many things. Because of the use of tree, fruit, serpent, cherubim, sword of fire, and other words of Moses, which were glyphs in the picture language of prehistory, it is evident that the creation and Adam and Eve stories were probably written in the glyphs of Naga, the predominant Eastern Hemisphere language of 11,500 years ago. This language is nearly identical to prehistoric Mayan and to the progenitor of many languages, which include Oriental and Polynesian tongues, Egyptian, Greek, and Yakut. My own knowledge of prehistoric Naga and Mayan glyphs enables me to read many Indian blankets and southwestern United States, of many Indian blankets of the southwestern United States, which have woven into them colorful glyphs depicting a cataclysm. I wonder if the Indians are chuckling to themselves, knowing that the tourists think they're buying blankets of just pretty pictures. Yakut is an interesting language, It's almost pure spoken Naga. It is spoken by Alaskan Eskimos. The town of Yakutat means the place where Yukut is spoken. It is also spoken by a native tribe in Turkey. Naga is almost its purest prehistoric form. Naga in almost its pure prehistoric form is spoken by a tribe in northern India. It is pure prehistoric Mayan. Moses certainly, and possibly Aaron, had access to royal Egyptian glyph stone libraries. Neither Moses nor Aaron knew how to read the ancient glyph languages of Naga or Mayan, therefore read the glyphs quite literally. Not being able to read the symbolism of the glyphs, in addition to reading them literally, Moses and Aaron, and possibly Ezra, read into the Adam and Eve story the social and religious attitudes of their day. In that time, woman was regarded as the root of all sin, a lowly creature, her birth recorded only as an exception, and basically being the cause of man's overall every downfall. A daily potential, this attitude persists even in worst forms in some religions, amazingly in our time. Is it any wonder that Eve was shouldered with the responsibility for the downfall of all mankind as a result of interpretations read into the Naga by Moses, and into Moses' reading by Ezra? Perhaps also it was read into the story by Egyptian priests long before Moses' time, and passed on to him verbally as history. If his father were really the one taken and executed by the captain of the guard, Nebuzaradan, then it had to be his grandfather who passed the story to him verbally. The fusing of two stories, P and J versions, into one to make the story of Genesis 1, 2, and 3 may confuse the man with Adam. It is possible that Adam, being only 9 generations ahead of Noah with the time span of Sudan Basin Polar Era, covering about 4,500 to 5,000 years, was not the man referred to in the creation, but his name and experiences were merged with the man's story. Remember, however, we are informed that Ezra dictated the entire history of to five scribes from memory, and this work contains Genesis as we know it today. For him to recall from the archives of his mind what he did, as well as he did, certainly bespeaks of inspiration of a high order. But it also appears evident that he had no knowledge of the fact that 4,500 years transpired between Genesis 1 and Noah's flood. It is clear from 2 Esdras 3:9 that Genesis 1 and Noah's flood were actually 2 inundations. However, for while speaking of the 2 occasions, he says of Noah's flood, and again in process of time thou broughtest the flood upon those that dwelt in the world and destroyedst them. Now, we mentioned before that the lineage of the high priest from Aaron to Ezra differs in numbers of generations, 17 or 20, and names as presented in 1 and 2 Esdras, and both differ in names from the book of Ezra. We also find differences in the lineages from Noah to Jesus, approximately 51 generations in the Bible. Is it any wonder, therefore, that some generations could have been omitted in the Adam to Noah line, not to mention the Noah to Jesus line and the Aaron to Ezra line? And in the light of the fact that, in addition to overwhelming evidence, there are countless legends in Asia-Pacific areas handed down from the inundation of 11,500 years ago, of a creation much like that of Genesis 1 and 2. Is it not possible that the man of the Genesis story became confused with Adam throughout the thousands of years, and through a succeeding cataclysm in Noah's time, 7,000 years ago? The miracle is that the whole story of creation and of Adam and Eve is as understood as it is, being 11,500 years old. It has suffered through many debacles, visited upon its guardians in the intervening years. Because of the lack of resolving information, the man and Adam are kept as one in this interpretation. The significant Naga glyphs given to us by Ezra through Moses' direct reading are cherubims, rib, Adam's sleep, man, woman, tree, fruit on the tree, serpent, and flaming sword. Our knowledge of Naga glyphs tells us that the tree of life symbolized a mother continent, a parent civilization lasting thousands of years longer than ours of today. An unadorned serpent represents water in its natural state, or the ocean. A serpent entwined around the tree signified that the mother continent was surrounded entirely by water. Genesis 3:15 actually describes Eve's heel on the serpent's head, depicting her victory over the oceans. Cherubims, which were not pretty, plump babies as we have always thought, but glyphs of hybrid man and beast. They were the glyphs for legs or foundations or underpinnings. Instead of being placed in the Garden of Eden, the foundation was taken away, and a Naga or Mayan reading of the Egyptian Book of the Dead shows that cherubims of the north, south, east, and west were taken away, meaning that all of the foundations of the mother continent were removed and destroyed. The flaming sword was the symbol of fire and earthquake. The fire signified what all legends of these cataclysms call earth fire, which is the planet-wide molten layer below the Earth's 60-mile thick shell, breaking through the surface during a cataclysm, a literal hell. It is, as far as I have been able to determine, the origin of man's concept of hell. I remember watching John Kennedy's funeral on television, and most vividly the incantation given by the Archbishop to keep John Kennedy from the doors of hell. His words went back to pre-Christian Rome, for in describing those gates of hell, he painted a picture of hell exactly like that of the molten sublayer breaking through the Earth's shell. It had to be handed down through thousands of years from one who had actually seen it. Chills ran up and down my spine as it stamped an undeniable impression on my mind. Now, to the tree. Fruit growing on that tree symbolized the mankind which settled the mother continent ages before Adam and Eve. Their eating the fruit tells us that they were descended from this original mankind. Eve eating first signifies that she was the younger generation. Adam eating second signifies he was the father, which made her his daughter. His daughter? Yes, it is the origin of one of the oldest Hebrew laws. In a catastrophe, if but a male and a female survive, they must mate, regardless of their relationship. If you want to check on this, read the story of Lot and his two daughters. The daughters were simply obeying Hebrew law. He is stated to be too drunk to know what he was doing. If he were, he couldn't have performed. He must have been a good actor. The glyph of the creation is even more revealing. There are three figures represented on the stone. The top figure is the face of a sleeping or dead person. There were no separate symbols for death and sleep in Naga. Both were represented as the same. The middle figure is shown as a male, and the bottom figure a female who is represented as the mother of all mankind. In addition, there are curved lines from the sleeping or dead person and the male middle figure to the bottom of the female figure. This glyph has been interpreted to mean that the middle figure, a male, was put to sleep, shown by the top figure, and a rib or ribs removed from him, the ribs being the curved lines, and fashioned into the bottom figure, the female, mother of all mankind. This fits beautifully with the story of Eve's creation, Adam therefore being both the male middle figure and the top figure a sleeping or dead person. There is a hitch in this story, however. The top figure, either sleeping or dead, is depicted as female. How could it be Adam, asleep, awake, dead, or alive? Moreover, in the Naga, the curved lines denote parentage rather than ribs. So, more reasonably, it appears that the top figure is a dead female whose offspring by the male middle figure, Adam, was the bottom female figure, Eve, the mother of all mankind. I've been asked countless times how one can tell the top figure to be a dead female, to the extent that I guess I owe an answer here. In Naga and prehistoric Mayan, they show that they worshipped but one deity and represented that deity by a glyph of a circle representing the sun. Any time a circle was shown on a tablet, it could only represent their deity. This tablet has 2 circles on it. Purists have stated that the writers of this tablet meant to show double intensity of the deity. Strange, I've never seen anywhere a double intensity of 2 circles in either Naga or prehistoric Mayan. The curious thing about these 2 circles is that they are located precisely where the female's breast should be on the top figure. Maybe that's what double intensity is all about. The most curious thing about this stone is that the most curious thing about this stone is that it fits the legend of Adam being a widower, and the name of his deceased wife being Lilith. If true, it would also reveal Lilith to be Eve's mother. So in essence, the story as read from the glyphs would be that Adam and Eve, who lived in the Garden of Eden in the mother continent tree, were descended from the original mankind, fruit of that land, which incidentally was surrounded entirely by water, serpent entwined around the tree. Eve was Adam's daughter, and he was a widower. They realized that in order to survive, they had to leave and never try to return, for the motherland was destined to be destroyed by a cataclysmic inundation. Eve had perceived this coming event, and Adam asked her how she had discovered it. She answered that she had inherited the intelligence to do so from her ancestors. As a result, she had gained victory over the inundation, Eve's heel on the serpent's head. They left the motherland, and afterward, the continent tree was subjected to a fiery earthquake, flaming sword, during which it lost its foundations, cherubs, and sank beneath the ocean, serpent, which remained forever afterwards, burying the continent forever afterward, crawling on its belly. So let's review the event 2 cataclysms ago, and then apply our knowledge toward a representative translation interpretation of Genesis 1, 2, and 3. It may be the most accurate reading of a story written 11,500 years ago.